Mark Stevens, former public defender of the 6th Judicial District, and he built his law office into a national model for holistic client-centered representation. And in 2019, you returned to private practice. Right. And he's continued, and the Justice Initiative is a nonprofit that he founded in 2015 and strives to advance a fair and just practice for indigent individuals impacted by the justice system. So I just lift all that up to you, and welcome, Mark. Thank you so much for being with us.
Yeah. Well, thank you very much. I'm glad to be here. I've got to say that when I was the public defender, nobody cares, but I was the public defender for 30 years here in town. And I was frequently asked to speak at various places. And I felt like it was part of my job to do that. And so I had a number of topics that I could speak on. And I had PowerPoints prepared, and I had my little bio and my headshot and all that, so I could send that out. But I got to tell you, this is the first time I've been asked to speak since I've been the public defender. And when I was asked at breakfast, I immediately said, sure, I'm glad to speak. And then it dawned on me, I don't have any speeches ready. I don't have a PowerPoint. I don't know how to do PowerPoints. I had people at the public defender's office who would do it for me. And so I had to think a couple of times, man, I'd like to go back to that invitation and rethink that. And so I'm here to tell you today, if this speech sucks, and it probably will, there are 4 reasons why it sucks. One is I'm not the public defender any longer, so I don't have people. The other is Juvenile Court Judge Tim Irwin, and I'll explain in a minute. The third is UT basketball, and the fourth is time change. So all of those 4 things kind of coalesced to make me ad-lib just a little bit. I had a rather difficult week last week. I had a lot of court Monday and Tuesday. And then on Wednesday, I had to spend the day in Anderson County, and I didn't get out of Anderson County until about 4:30. And then I had to drive to Nashville that night to meet Dawn Diener, who's the former public defender in Nashville, and I had dinner with her. I didn't get to my hotel till about 10 o'clock. Thursday, there was a death penalty seminar in Nashville, so I had to attend that. And after the seminar, there was a reception where a number of the speakers were going to be present, and some of those speakers I'm trying to hire on a death penalty case that I had. So I had to go to that reception, and about 8 o'clock when that reception was over, I had to go back to my hotel room and check out and then drive back to Knoxville. And I got back to Knoxville about midnight, and I set the alarm for 2:30 because I had to get into the office and get ready for a hearing that Judge Irwin was insisting that I participate in on Friday. So I had a hearing on Friday, and yesterday morning I had 2 clients come into the office, and then a friend of mine called me and said, you wanted me to Barley's to watch UT play Kentucky. And I told my wife, I've got to give a speech Sunday, I really need to work on that. And she said, no, I think you really need to go to Barley's and drink beer and watch UT play basketball. And then I didn't have any idea UT was going to play that well and win, which may have amounted to me drinking an extra beer or 2 in celebration. And then this morning I woke up after that week and I told my wife, I have never slept until 7:15 in my entire life. And she said, well, I got news for you, it's 8:15. The time changed. And I thought, 8:15, I have to be at this speech at 9:45, and I haven't written it yet. So here we go. I have no idea what I'm going to say, but I'm going to say something. One of the things that always made me mad, or got a pushback from me as the public defender, is when I would hear people say, the United States has the best criminal justice system in the world. And I used to think, first of all, how do you know that? I don't know what the criminal justice system is like in Spain or France or Italy or the UK or Ukraine. How would I know that? And secondly, what I know about the criminal justice system in the United States is not really good. And so people who make that statement, stick their chest out and brag because it's the good old U.S. USA, we've got the greatest of everything. I always pushed back when people said what a great system we had. And I think that statement is kind of dangerous too, because when you have the best, you are reluctant to change. Why change if you have such a great system? And so I always thought that statement was dangerous because it just allowed people to continue in practices that we've had forever, whether they're good or bad. We just sort of blindly go forward saying, well, we have a great criminal justice system. And while I don't intend to make this political, and I'm the first to admit maybe I'm wrong about this, I don't think our criminal justice system is all that good. And I think I can go further, and I can say, come walk in my shoes for a month or so, and I think the criminal justice system that you'll see will make you sick. There is an us and them mentality in the criminal justice system. There's clearly two systems of justice, the one for people who have money and one for people who don't. And far too often the people who don't are people of color. And so, in my view, I think the criminal justice system is oppressive towards minorities, and it's oppressive towards people who don't have money, and it treats those people very differently than it treats people who look like us and have some money. And so what I thought I would do is talk to you a little bit about the bail system. And I think that is a good example of how the system really has two very different ways of moving forward when it comes to bail. I don't know if you understand the bail system or the way it works, but I guess the first thing you need to know is that the Tennessee Constitution provides everyone who gets arrested has a right to bail. So you start from the premise that when you get arrested, you have a right to get bail and to get out pre-trial. And it makes sense because if you're going to prepare your defense, it's going to be really hard to do if you're in a jail cell. And so you need to be out, and you need to have a lawyer to meaningfully prepare a defense for you. And why that's important is because I don't think people understand how easy it is to get someone else arrested. If you think about being a magistrate and someone shows up in front of you and is willing to swear that Janie stole my wallet, or Bobby, my boyfriend, hit me in the mouth, or Johnny pulled a gun on me and threatened to shoot me, how does a magistrate know if that happened or not? The magistrate isn't there, and you've got someone who's willing to swear under oath that it did happen, and sometimes they describe crimes that are very, very serious. And so the magistrate, if you're willing to swear to it, the magistrate's going to issue that warrant. And so it is very easy, if you want, to manipulate the system and get warrants issued for people if that's what your goal is. And so it becomes even more important that if you're the person that's being arrested, you should have a right to make bond, and you should have a right to get out of jail. And so the question I wanted to talk about, or the issue I wanted to talk about today, is how does that process work? Okay, so someone has accused me of a road rage incident where, as I pulled around someone, I displayed a weapon. And someone is charging me with aggravated assault as a result of displaying that weapon as I drove around them. And so I get arrested for that. What's going to happen to me? Well, the person is going to show up in front of a magistrate, or the person is going to call a police officer and tell the police officer what happened, and the police officer is going to appear before a magistrate. And the magistrate is going to issue the warrant, and then there's the way it used to work. Then there comes to the point where, okay, what should that person's bond be? And in the older days, police officers had great influence over what that bond should be. If the police officer thought the charge was shaky, the police officer might say, $1,000, $1,500, something like that. If the police officer thought the charge was legit, and maybe it involved a gun, the police officer might say, I think $20,000 is a reasonable bond, or $25,000 is a reasonable bond. And so the magistrate would put that bond down, and I would be in jail, and I would be notified pretty quickly after getting in jail that I've been arrested. Of course, I would know that. Here's what the charge is, and here's what my bond is. And then I would be put in a cell. And that's it. And so I've got to decide, am I going to make bond, and how am I going to make bond? And the way bond works is if my bond is $10,000, and I have $10,000, I can have somebody post the $10,000, in other words, give the entire amount now to the clerk at the detention facility where I would be held, and I would be released. And if I showed up for court, and once my case was resolved, I would get that $10,000 back. But most people can't do that. Most people can't make what's called a cash bond. Most people have to go through a bail bonding company. And so bail bonding companies charge 10% of whatever the bond is. So if I had a $20,000 bond, a bail bondsman would get me out of jail for $2,000. Now, if I show up for court, I don't get that $2,000 back. That is the premium that's paid to the bonding company and the risk that they take to assure that I'm going to be coming to court as I'm supposed to come to court. The fact of the matter is bonding companies in the olden days, maybe 40 years ago, used to have runners, and they used to have people out on the street actually looking for people who don't show up for court, but it really hasn't worked that way in about the last couple of decades. I'm not saying that I'm not saying that this is true 100%. Anything that I say is not true 100% of the time. There's always exceptions here or there, but for the most part, when people don't show up for court, they actually get arrested because some police officer stops them for running a stop sign, or they stop them for something else and they run them and they find out that they missed court and there's an attachment out for their arrest and they take them into custody. So most of the time, people who don't show up for court wind up showing up for court because they get arrested for something else, or they get stopped for something else, and the police officer discovers it. So the days of the bonding company and the bounty hunters out looking for you, it may make for good television, but it doesn't really work that way. So, what if you're in jail and you're Mark Stevens and you've got a $20,000 bond, and I can actually call my friend Harry and ask him for $2,000 and he gives it to me, and so now I can make bond. I get out, right? But what if I don't have a friend like Harry and I'm sitting there? The only difference between me and the guy who doesn't have a friend named Harry Wade is that he doesn't get out, and he sits there. It's not that he's any more dangerous than I am. It's not that the public is going to be at any greater risk if he gets out or not. It's just that he doesn't have money and Mark Stevens does. So Mark Stevens gets out on bail and that guy has to sit in jail. And I'm telling you right now, if you want a trial in Knox County, we got 3 judges who are working very hard. But after the last couple of years, if you want a trial in Knox County, you're probably looking at a couple of years. So if I have $2,000, I'm out on the street for the next couple of years. If I don't have $2,000, I'm in jail. And I'm going to sit in jail until I get my trial. And then when I come into court, the statistics show that there is a significant increase in the chances that you will be convicted if you are in jail at the time of your trial versus if you've made bond and are out. The statistics show that those folks have a far higher likelihood that they're going to have a more positive result, including probation, than people who appear in jail in stripes and have been in jail for the last couple of years. I guess, the judge doesn't have to put you in jail, you're already in jail. And so it's easier just to keep that status quo as opposed to making some sort of shift and releasing them from custody. So it's really important if people get out. And if Mark Stevens gets out and I am a danger to the community, you can't really do much about it. If Harry will give me the $2,000, and even if I'm a danger to the community, I get out. And so there's no ability for the judge to say, after bond is set, there's really no ability for a judge to say, I really don't want him out on the street. I'm entitled by the Tennessee Constitution to get out on the street. I'm entitled to a bond. And the judge can consider the risk to the community in setting a bond, but I'm just telling you the way it used to work is they really didn't have much information about Mark Stevens when they were issuing the warrants, and so they may know it, they may not know it. I may have a long criminal history, and that would suggest that I might be a risk to the public, and so the bond may reflect that risk, but I might not have a long criminal history. And they may not know what my history is necessarily, and they may not have reason to increase my bond. And so I think it's important for you to realize it's really easy to get a warrant. And then really whether I stay in jail or whether I'm out on bond really just depends basically on whether I have money or whether I have a friend named Harry Wade. So that...
Is it all right if I interrupt you for a
Sure,
question?
please do.
So, Mr. Stevens, I'm glad you're here and that you're giving your perspective, because as somebody who's caught in the middle of different perspectives, and if I can, just kind of tell you a little story to say why I say that, because you speak from 30, 40 plus years of experience.
41.
Okay, 41, I wasn't gonna age you, but.
And let me just tell you right now, I am right. My perspective is right.
Okay.
The other perspectives,
So on the flip side of that, as somebody, walking around in the community, if you will, I had my purse stolen last summer. They broke into my car when I was running and stole my purse. And I was literally 10 minutes, after waiting for the police for an hour, I was 10 minutes behind the guy by calling my credit card company where he was using it and stuff. And long story short, through multiple investigators and stuff, I found out that the police knew who it was and that they weren't gonna arrest him. Many conversations were, ma'am, the car, thefts or the thefts from cars are so rampant right now, we'll arrest 10 people, put them in jail, they'll be out by the afternoon, like all these kinds of, they told me his name. They knew who it was by the second investigator that had been assigned to it, and they're like basically saying there's no point. But yet I was, I went through and followed them to the gas station, went through the trash cans looking for my stuff, and they wouldn't even send a, police officer
Right.
there. And I say all that, or I share that personal story to say that somebody in the community, we're stuck between different messages and different perspectives. So you're saying, anybody can go get a warrant. Like, I couldn't get that guy to go to jail. I mean, he took my purse, they knew who he was. I had to spend all that time, redoing all my stuff, and I couldn't get the police to arrest him for anything in my life. So we're like, so who are they arresting? I guess kind of ultimately my question is,
if they're black and they're male and there's drugs or guns involved, they're
Yeah,
arresting
they're going
those
to
folks.
jail.
If they're white,
Yeah. Well, this guy apparently had gone down the path of drugs and all that other kind of stuff. He was not after.
and I would caution you that statement, and I've heard it before, that statement, well, there's really no point, they'll be out by this afternoon. That's not the point. Whether they'll be out by this afternoon or not, they'll still be under a warrant. They'll still have to go through the process. They'll still have to face a judge. They'll still have to face the likelihood of getting convicted. If they get convicted and they get probation, there'll be a supervised period. So it's really short-sighted for the police to say, I'm not anti-police,
Yeah.
but for the police to say, well, there's no point, they'll be out by this afternoon. Well, they should be out. The Tennessee Constitution says get them out.
Right.
But that doesn't mean it's over. Doesn't mean the process is over. It doesn't mean that the day of reckoning is, they're going to escape that because they made bond. They still have to go to court. They still
Right.
have to face you and the charges. They still have to speak to the consequences.
Right.
So-
So being stuck between those messages, what is the ultimate source, I guess, from your experience and going back to why are the people going in there? And it sounds like there's different people that are going into jail, but what's the source, and is there any root cause from a community standpoint to either change the message or change does that question make sense? I'm sorry, I'm taking you
Yeah.
down a rabbit hole, but.
I think there is a police emphasis on a handful of offenses and a certain segment of our community. So I think we over-police in poor areas of town. We over-police in minority areas of town. We under-police in Farragut and Bearden because, white kids don't commit crime like black kids do. There's not the drug problem in Farragut or Bearden that there is in our minority communities. And I'm not saying that's true. I'm just saying that there is a belief generally that we need to marshal our resources and focus on the poorer sections of town. And I think they are disproportionately represented in our jails and in our courts. I'll never forget the judge, I've forgotten his name, a judge who walked off the bench in Memphis saying, I have sent the last black man to prison that I'm going to send. I'm over. And it is, I believe, it is true in Knox County. I believe that if you go into just about any court, we're prosecuting poor people and disproportionately people of color who are poor. And that's who we're focusing on. And we're focusing on drug offenses, we're focusing on weapons, we're focusing on DUI, we're focusing on domestic violence. Those are all high-risk activities, bad things, and you would want a police presence to focus on that. But that's where the resources and the time and the energy is and gangs. I mean, oh my God, every black kid in Knoxville is a member of a gang if you hear the prosecutor's office talk about it. Everybody's in a gang because they had a red shirt on. That's obviously colors. Might be, but it just seems like an overreaction. And I think you could have gone to the DA's office and you could have said, I want to take out a warrant, and the police won't cooperate with me. The DA's office would have then filtered what you know and taken a look at it, and if they believed there was probable cause, they could have allowed you to issue your own warrant and you be the signatory on the warrant, if that's what you wanted to do. So there are ways when the police, I had my house burglarized, and they came in and threw this dust all over everywhere and told me, well, there's no prints anywhere, there's nothing we can do, and they left. Well, maybe they're right, but it wasn't much of, in my view, there wasn't much of an effort to try to identify anybody who might have broken into my house, and we knew what they stole, and I had numbers, and we could have contacted the pawn shops, and it seemed to me like they could have done some things, but it wasn't, it wasn't gangs, it wasn't domestic violence, it wasn't guns or drugs, so, well, they weren't really interested. And I don't mean to beat them up for that, but that's just kind of the way it is.
No, I appreciate your perspective.
So, pre-trial bail, when I was a public defender, looking at this system of bail and how poor people stay in jail and rich people don't, and that didn't seem to make sense to me, we were able to sort of launch an effort, and we got a grant of $348,000 for Knox County to sort of redesign our bail system. And so there were, I think, 9 criminal justice agencies that started meeting on a regular basis. And it surprised me how much pushback there was to this. There were 2 criminal justice agencies, and I won't mention their name, but they're the Knox County Sheriff's Office and they're the DA's office, who didn't want to sign off on the grant. They didn't want to apply to get a grant to redesign our criminal justice system. Now, the DA's office quickly got on board, so I don't want to beat them up, but there was an awful lot of time spent to try and convince the sheriff just to put his signature on a grant application, because the system that existed at the time was the system that had existed for decades, and we got the greatest criminal justice system in the world. Why change it? And a lot of people's business and livelihood depended on that current bail system, so there really wasn't any interest in redesigning our system. But thankfully, with the help of a couple of judges and pressure applied to the sheriff, he signed, and we got the grant, and we started meeting on a regular basis, and we started looking at what the statutes actually say about the way bonds should be set. And then there was this day of reckoning where we had to look each other in the face and say, we don't do that. We've never done that, and that's been the law forever, and shouldn't we be doing that? And the realization was, yeah, we should be doing that. But if you do it, it's sure going to change the way bonds are set here, and do we want to do that? It was just an interesting dynamic. Do we want to follow the law and do it the way the statutes say? Because if we do it that way, it's sure not going to look like what we know to be the system right now that we're very comfortable with and we think is the greatest system in the world. And so it was a really interesting tension that existed for about a year as we met on a regular basis trying to design what a new system for setting bail should look like. And the reality is the new system would put a lot of pressure on a lot of agencies, particularly the Public Defender's Office. And so I went through this really interesting dynamic of, boy, be careful what you ask for, because you may get it and then you may not be able to live with it. And just to give you an example, the public defender for the state of Maryland got sued because when the magistrate meets for the first time with an individual who's been arrested and is setting bail, that person has a right to counsel. And if that person can't afford a lawyer needs to be appointed to represent that person before the magistrate at that critical stage where the magistrate sets bond. Well, the public defender didn't have the ability to do that, nor did we have the ability to do that here. So when the individuals meet with the magistrate for the first time to set bond, if they have a right to counsel and they can't afford a lawyer and it has to be the public defender, who's going to do that? Every public defender that I had at least 250 open cases. Some of them had 400 and 500 open cases. How are they going to start appearing with a magistrate at a bond hearing that, oh, by the way, happens 3 times a day, 7 days a week, 365 days a year? So who am I gonna say, you need to be at the magistrate's hearing tonight at midnight because they've got 30 people who've been arrested and they have bond hearings and you've got to represent them. And if they say, okay, I'll do that, then reasonably they're gonna say, I'm not gonna be at work tomorrow and I've got court. And so as a practical matter, I wanted those people to be represented at that bond hearing, but I didn't have the capacity to do it. And so and the law clearly says they're entitled to it. The public defender in Maryland lost that lawsuit, and the judge said, those are critical stage, that is a critical stage of the criminal justice process, you need to represent them. Now, the Maryland legislature gave the public defender office some incredible amount of money, and I think they gave them like 70 new public defenders or 700, I don't remember what the number was. It was an incredible number of public defenders to do nothing but represent people before magistrates at bond hearings. So, as we were going through this process of how are we going to design a system, the reality was, wow, this is really difficult to do. How do you make this happen? Because if there's a public defender that's going to be there, there's got to be a DA there, right, to present the risk factors to the judge and why the bond should be higher or lower. And the DA has better data than I would have. So the DA has access to NCIC, which is a National Criminal Justice Database. So if Johnny gets arrested in Knoxville and he's been arrested in Arkansas, the DA will know that. I only know if he's been arrested in Knox County. That's the only system I've got access to. So I can tell you what your record is in Knox County, but if you got arrested in Oak Ridge, I don't know that. I don't have data that would show that. The DA does. And so when you're appearing before the magistrate, you want the DA to be there because the DA has more comprehensive data than I've got. Yes, ma'am?
Why wouldn't we have access?
It's the National Criminal Justice Database is, I think, a federally created and managed database, and you have to apply to the feds, and it's only law enforcement that have access to that. It's not something that public defenders or the public generally has access to. And so I can't sign up to be a recipient of the National Criminal Justice Database. DAs can. So, and I'm not even frustrated about that. It's just, I haven't really ever thought about it. It's always been that way, and that's the way it is. But certainly a DA would need to be at a bond hearing so that the DA could tell the judge, does this person have a history of failing to appear in court? Does this person have a history of committing new offenses while out on bond? Is this person a risk to the community? What's the breadth of his or her prior record? Those sorts of things are all factors that a magistrate should consider in determining what your bond should be, what's the appropriate bond. So as a practical matter, we're sitting there in a room saying, we need to do what? We need to be at all these hearings? Because right now magistrates have bond hearings, I think at 8 o'clock in the morning, sometime early afternoon, late afternoon, sometime around dinner time, and then they have bond hearings at midnight. So, 3 times a day, a public defender needs to be there, and it's going to be different people. They're going to have to be out of the detention facility because they're going to have to talk to that person to find out what's going on. They're going to have access to a phone so they can call family members. I mean, it would take a lot of work and a lot of time, and that's kind of what the law requires, and we have never done that. And I got news for you, we're not doing it now. Even after 3 years of bail reform and process reform, we're still not doing it. So what we've decided to do now is that a magistrate can set bond without that information. And it's not really setting bond, it's just sort of setting bond. And then if you can't make that bond that really wasn't set, you get to go in front of a judge within 48 hours and you get to have a bond hearing where bond will be set. I mean, it's the dumbest thing. We didn't know what else to do. And so when you get arrested, you are going to go in front of a magistrate, and a magistrate's going to set bond. Pretty much like they used to set it, which was, it should be $20,000. And that's the way they do it, basically. And they take some notes, and they scribble some things down, and they put it in a warrant to make you think, when you look at it, oh, they really considered something other than slamming their fingers against the desk. They didn't do that. One magistrate said, well, we just pretty much pull it out of our, you can imagine. And so, that's what they said. That's pretty much the way we do it. And if you can make that bond, you can make that bond. If you can't make that bond, within 48 hours, you're going to be in front of a real judge, and you're going to have a public defender who's going to be in that court anyway, and that public defender is going to make the case for what your bond should be. And then we started arguing over, is that a motion to change bond, or is that a motion to set bond? Because has it already been set with the magistrate? And the judge would say, well, of course. And I would say, well, no, it's not, because that wasn't a hearing. That wasn't a bond hearing. He didn't have a lawyer. The magistrate didn't consider any of the statutory factors. That's not a legitimate bond. So when I'm in front of you 2 days later, that's not a motion to reduce bond. That's a motion to set bond. And the difference is I have the burden of showing why his bond should be modified. I don't have any burden to show what bond should be set and why I shouldn't be released on my own recognizance or on pretrial release with no monetary condition at all. So I need that second position, which is bond hasn't been set at all, Judge. It's up to the state to convince you that a release ROR or a release pretrial is not appropriate, but a release only with monetary conditions is appropriate. That's a burden that they have to meet. But what they've been able to convince the judge is, oh, no, the bond's already been set by the magistrate. And so if you want to change that bond, that's really a motion to change bond, and you have the burden of showing why it should be changed. And you can't do that through hearsay. You've got to call witnesses. Well, I just got appointed to the case a minute ago. How would I have my witnesses queued up? How would I know who my witnesses are? And how would I have them queued up to be able to put on proof to convince a judge that this bond should be changed or modified? So I'm a little bit in the weeds right now, but I want to just tell you that what the system that we settled on is not very good, and as a practical matter, really doesn't change anything anyway. The magistrate sets the bond, and then 2 days later, I've got to convince the judge why that should be changed. I don't have any information as to why it should be changed, and so we do it all the time, and we're unsuccessful almost all the time. And the judges sometimes split the baby and will give you a little bit of relief, so you'll think that they're really considering what they're supposed to be considering and modifying a bond, but they don't modify it by very much. Yes, ma'am.
How does that second appearance happen? Do you do it on every case, or does the person being incarcerated have to know that they have the right to ask for that? Or
now the judges automatically set it if you have not made the bond that the magistrate set 2 days earlier. So if you're still in jail 2 days later, you're going to have a bond hearing. And probably the public defender is going to be appointed. Unless the public defender has a conflict, then some private lawyer will be appointed. But I can't tell, I mean, there have been a number of times when I've walked into court. I've got 2 cases tomorrow. So I'll walk into court tomorrow ready for my 2 cases, and it's not an unusual circumstance to be told, oh yeah, you've been appointed on Joe Schmo, and he's got a bond hearing today. Are you ready? Joe who? I mean, am I ready? Well, of course not. I can't spell his name, let alone be ready.
And so I imagine it's those that are still sitting there or those that don't have the friend Harry or don't have the resources.
Yeah.
That's when, for the most
Right.
part, those individuals.
They haven't been able to make that bond in the first 48 hours. And the case law says a bond hearing within 48 hours of arrest is reasonable. So let's think about Harry getting arrested, all right?
Oh, hell no. I would not put mine up.
So somebody
I'm gonna sit
like
there a
Harry,
long time.
somebody like Harry, if you don't have that magistrate setting a bond, somebody like Harry is going to get arrested, and he's going to sit in jail for 48 hours waiting for that hearing in court in front of that judge. And Harry's going to say, I've got the resources to make bond. Why do I have to sit here for 48 hours to make a bond? Well, because a bond hasn't been set. Well, why hasn't a bond been set? Well, because we've got this new system, and we've got to have a hearing, and Harry's going to say, I don't care about your new system. Set a bond. I don't care. Set it anywhere. I mean, pull it out anywhere you want to pull it out. Just set it. I'll make it, and I'll get out of jail. So it's really not fair either way. So if we don't have that magistrate setting that bond initially, people who can make bond don't because a bond hasn't been set. Or if the magistrate sets the bond without considering all the statutory factors, which is what is your income, what is your ability to make a bond, what is your track record for failing to appear in court, what is your prior, if they don't have that data and they can't factor those things in, then any bond they set is going to be arbitrary. You can't set an arbitrary bond, you have to set a bond that is meaningful. And if you're gonna set a meaningful bond, you can only do that if that person has a lawyer, and that person doesn't have a lawyer at that point. And so we have got this system that is not working, in spite of the fact that the criminal justice agencies in Knox County have tried to figure out a way to make this work. And we're gonna get sued. And we've got two national organizations breathing down our neck. They've already fired 2 shots over the bow and told our local criminal justice people, we are going to sue you unless you want to change your system to look like this. And this was 19 pages that they sent us. And these groups, the Civil Rights Corps and the Southern Poverty Law Center, I like them. They're not liberal, radical groups. They just have this notion that if you've got laws, you probably ought to follow them. And if they're difficult to follow, tough. Follow them anyway. Well, what we like to say is we have laws and we'll follow them unless it's really hard to do. And if it's really hard to do, we're not gonna completely follow them. We're gonna create some system that's kinda fair and kinda not. And so that's where we are. The Civil Rights Corps and the Southern Poverty Law Center have sent the second letter saying, you have been working really hard and you've made some improvements in your system, but you are a far cry from what the law requires you to do. So you're going to do that or we're going to sue. And our folks have said, that's all right, we're not going to do it. We can just ignore them. And I try to remind them, well, that's what Harris County, Texas, Houston did. And $14 million legal fees later, the Southern Poverty Law Center and Civil Rights Corps won a judgment. They're completely revamping their system to look exactly the way the Civil Rights Corps and the Southern Poverty Law Center told them it should look, and it cost them $14 million in legal fees in order to lose that lawsuit. And then when they came here, they sued in Hamlin County, and they won for the exact same thing they're going to sue us for. They went to Rutherford County and sued over private probation and won, and their legal fees in Rutherford County were $4 million that they got the county to have to pay. So they have filed either 3 or 4 lawsuits in Tennessee. They've won all of them, and I think the lowest legal fee has been $2 million. And I'm telling our judges, you know, you probably ought to pay attention. They're not going to go away. They're going to sue you. When they say they're going to sue you, they're going to sue you. And I can't tell you where they've sued and lost. So that would make me nervous if I'm the law director or if I'm part of the criminal justice agencies. I would take their threat to sue seriously, but it's really hard to fix this system, and so it doesn't look like we're going to do it. We've made some fixes. We've made a lot of progress, but we're not where we need to be. I had an acquaintance that got arrested Friday night at 1 o'clock in the morning. It was Thursday, just past midnight. It was 1 o'clock in the morning. He got arrested for DUI. He was supposed to appear before he has resources. He was supposed to appear in front of the magistrate at 8 o'clock Friday morning, and they didn't bring him in front of the magistrate. And they offered no explanation for why they didn't bring him in front of the magistrate. But okay, the magistrate does it again at noon, and they didn't bring him in front of the magistrate at noon, and offered no explanation. I called and raised hell with the magistrate, who then faxed out to the detention facility and said, I want to see this guy, bring him in front of me at 3 o'clock. They do it by video. And 3 o'clock came and went, and they didn't bring him in front of the magistrate because they didn't. And they offered no explanation for why they didn't. And then they tell me, when I called probably 15 times out to the detention facility, and I was told, at 8 o'clock tonight, he'll be in front of the magistrate. So he was arrested at 1 o'clock in the morning, Friday morning. He saw a magistrate at 8 p.m. Friday evening. So he's got, I mean, all you got to do is stick him in front of a magistrate. And you know what they did when they stuck him in front of a magistrate? They pre-trialed him. Pre-trial means you don't have to make a bond. We'll just let you go. You're not a risk to the public. You have never failed to appear in court. We don't worry about you being out. We know you'll show up, and so you can go. And so they made him serve, 18 hours in jail before they said, oh, you don't need to be here, you can leave. And all they had to do was stick him in front of a camera, in front of a magistrate who wanted to see him, but that's apparently too hard to do for the detention facility. So that's my frustrations. I'm sure people who work at the detention facility can tell you why that's a challenge. But to an outsider like me, I think it can't possibly be a challenge to stick somebody's face in front of a camera to talk to a magistrate who wants to see them. So that's my frustration. It's not working for people with means, but it works for them far better than it works for people without means. And so that's my frustration, and I don't know how this story will end at some point. Let me just tell you briefly what the law says. The law says when you get arrested, there is a presumption that you should be released on your own recognizance. It's called an ROR release. There is a presumption that you should be released ROR. When you get released ROR, there is no supervision while you're out. And there shouldn't be. You're presumed to be innocent, right? So why should you have to submit to supervision for something you didn't do? If we really believe that you are innocent, then we shouldn't impose restrictions on you while you're out on bail, having been charged with something we believe you didn't do. So the presumption is release everybody ROR. Now, if the person poses a threat, then we can do something called pretrial release. We have created pretrial release that is managed by the Knox County Probation Department, and they have 3 levels of pretrial release. So I get out on pretrial release, I don't have to post any money. I get out on pretrial release, and I have to report to the pretrial release office every time my case is set for court. So if my case is set a month from now, on that date, I have to show up at the pretrial release office and say, here I am, and I showed up for court like I'm supposed to. And they say, okay, great, when's your next court date? 2 months. All right, I want to see you in 2 months. Okay. That's called level 1. Level 2 supervision is, I think I have to call every week. So I don't have to show up. I just have to call you and say, I'm still alive, I haven't killed anyone, I'm working, and I've got court in 3 weeks, and I'll call you next week. And they say, okay. Level 3 is I have to call you every week, multiple times a week. I think 3 times a week, maybe I'm wrong about this. And I have to report to you every week. So I have to go to the pretrial release office and say, here I am. And they say, you sure are, there you are. Okay, I'll see you next week. Okay, I'll see you. And that makes us feel safer. I don't know why, because if I killed somebody right before I went to pretrial release, I doubt I would say, here I am, and I just killed somebody. So I don't know how it makes us feel any safer, but it does. And so that is ROR with no supervision, pretrial release with 3 different levels of supervision, and then the 3rd layer is release with conditions, and usually the condition is a monetary condition. So but the 3rd is I'm not suitable for ROR release. I'm not suitable for pretrial. So I'm released on conditions, and the condition usually is a monetary condition. I have to post a bond of some sort, a financial bond. And I can do that by cash and get it all back, or I can do it through a bail bonding company. So that's the current system we have now.
So if you had unlimited resources, how would you design it? Would you design it like Maryland's, or?
Well, I mean, I think the law requires that counsel be present at that first appearance. I don't think you want the first appearance to be 48 hours after arrest, because you're going to wind up housing a lot of people for a couple of days that you don't need to house, and that's expensive. And we've got to feed them, we've got to take care of them, we've got to put them in a facility, we've got to put them in a unit, and that's costly. We've got to guard them, that's costly. So, I would get public defenders and prosecutors to be at that initial appearance. I would do it quickly. We have a standing order now because of COVID that everybody charged with a C, our misdemeanors are graded by severity, A, B, and C, A being the most serious, C being the least serious. A carries a potential of up to 11 months and 29 days in jail. A B carries a potential of up to 6 months in jail, and a C carries up to 30 days in jail. So it's by severity. We currently have an order, a standing order that the judges have entered saying everybody charged with an A, B, or C misdemeanor should be automatically released from jail. So don't hold them, get them out, unless they're charged with domestic violence, they're charged with DUI, or they're charged with a sex offense. So even if it's a misdemeanor, if it falls in the DUI, sex offense, or domestic violence, then you don't automatically release them, you go process of determining what is the appropriate release status. So they're not ROR'd, but they might be pretrialed. If they're not pretrialed, they might be released with conditions, and that's usually a monetary condition. They have extended that order to include, our felonies are graded A, B, C, D, and E. E being the lowest felony severity, and A being the highest severity. The order has now extended that E's, D's, and C's can also be released on pretrial unless it involves violence, it involves weapons, it involves sex, it involves, there's a, did any of you see the movie The Jerk?
Yeah.
So that's a Steve Martin movie, and it's got this scene in it that I think is hilarious. It's really not, but I think it's hilarious, where he is a barker in a carnival, and his job is to guess your weight. And if he guesses it, if he's not within 10 pounds, I think, either way, you get to win any of these gifts that are along the wall, and the wall is huge, and the gifts are incredible, stuffed animals bigger than me, a car, and all this. And then he says, well, you can't win all of these gifts. You can't, anything on that top row you don't get. Well, actually, the top row or the second row or the third, and when he gets through with this skit, you can win like a paperclip. And I think that's our bail system. You automatically get released ROR, unless you're charged with DUI, well, or guns, that's right, or sex, you can't do that, or domestic violence, you can't, and the list, it reminds me of the Steve Martin movie that, well, you're not gonna get released ROR no matter what, unless you're charged with stealing a paperclip. Yeah.
So the former U.S. Attorney General has written a book and he's being interviewed and made the statement to Lester Holt on TV that when asked if there's systematic racism in the criminal justice system, said systems are not racist, only individuals have racism in their souls, I think. How do you react to that?
I'd say that's not completely accurate. I see where he's coming from. Not all aspects of the system are racist, but there are aspects of our system, like bail, for instance, that by the process it is racist. It is impacting poor people and disproportionately minorities. So the system itself is racist. The criminal justice system as a whole, as implemented by the forces that are running the criminal justice system, which are basically police, prosecutors, and judges, that is oftentimes utilized in a racist way. So, give me a white drug dealer with a gun any day to a black drug dealer with a gun because I'm going to get a better result. Now, is that racist? Yes, in my view. And is it racist in its application? Yes. The prosecutors, and this is on tape, and I'm going to get in real trouble if anybody sees this, but I believe in my heart that I have a better chance and a better outcome with a white drug dealer with a gun than I do a black drug dealer with a gun. So I agree with him when he says much of the system, if he were to say much of the system is not racist in its design, it's racist in the implementation of the system. But I would disagree with him because there are parts of the system that in its design is designed in a racist way.
So non-racists in that system are just going to carry out the way it's always been done. You have good people and bad systems.
Yeah, there are stereotypes that just exist. Black people use drugs at a higher rate than white people. There is that stereotype, and it's just not supported by the data. Black men smoke marijuana more frequently than white men smoke marijuana, and the studies just don't validate that. They just don't support that. But I think every prosecutor would tell you that we've got a bigger problem with marijuana in our minority community than we do in our white community. The kids at Farragut don't smoke as much dope as kids at Austin East. I just don't. I don't know where they get that. It takes me full circle back to what I started with. We have the greatest criminal justice system in the world. Everybody says that, and everybody believes it. And I don't know what that's based on. It's just based on a stereotype that sort of inherently exists within Americans who believe everything white and American is the greatest in the world. It's not hard to convince us of that. We want to be convinced of that. So I would say the system in its implementation is racist, and the system itself, in some aspects of its design, is designed in a racist way.
So you're not black, you're not,
I'm not.
you're not hurting for funds.
I am.
Almost
But I know Harry Wade.
You're in real
You're in
trouble.
Don't get arrested.
Your DUI friend presumably is likewise, you guys weren't treated particularly good. Does that have anything to do with you being a public defender and kind of being on the other side of it?
Well, I'm sure I became a public defender because I have a left-leaning liberal bent. I was born and raised in a diehard blue-collar Catholic family, and I was preached from the time I can remember that, your job in life is to help the poor. And so I think I found this balance between my core value and my professional job of being a public defender. That was what I was supposed to be. And so, as I will frequently say, you got to take what I say with a grain of salt, because I am left-leaning, more liberal than most, and I have a very poor view of the way our criminal justice system works. So you do have to take what I say, even though I'm right about everything. You do have to take what I say with a grain of salt, because occasionally I'll go over the line. Occasionally.
Thank you for
Yeah.
what you've done.
Thank you.
Can I follow that question with a little bit more of how is your, it's a personal question, but how is your spiritual journey through your 30-plus years in the public defender's office? Has it changed? Has it?
I abandoned my spiritual journey several years ago. I am so frustrated with the Catholic Church over this sex abuse, child abuse thing. I'm sick of the way they lie and hide it and protect predators. And I felt like that was the church choosing the institution over the people they're supposed to be serving. And so for me, I walked away from the Catholic Church about 10 years ago, and I don't think there was anything to do to get me to come back. And during the last 10 years, I haven't spent a lot of time thinking about my spiritual development, but I am jaded and angry and have come to my own sense of what I have to do to fulfill a spiritual journey, and it doesn't include sort of organized religion. I'm sorry.
Well, try Good
That's
Shepherd.
really inappropriate.
Dory, give him a blessing.
Yeah, you can edit that last part. This speech should have ended about 2 minutes ago.
You should try your journey at Good Shepherd.
Sounds like a spiritual journey to me. So.
Well, my friend Charles Phillips was trying to get me to come here. It's a long way from Farragut.
I come here from Hardin Valley every.
Yeah, she does.
I'll pick you up.
We're here from all.
All right, well, thank you very much. I appreciate it.